Yo,
Hey, good to see you for the first time today.
it's good to see you for the first time today as well. Really appreciate you jumping on here. So, for people that don't know, let me give my quick spiel here, then I'm going to intro you. So, this will be on the Living in Salt Lake City, Utah YouTube channel. And first, let me just throw this out there. So, we have people that kind of reach out to us all the time. I literally just helped someone buy a house 2 days ago that we met from YouTube. So we do get a lot of people that reach out to us, that call us, text us, email us. I'm going to put our contact information in the description below for anyone who wants to reach out, even just ask questions about the market, which is why I'm super excited to bring you on here, Boo Maddox, from our Utah County office. How long have you been running that office now? How long has it been?
We're at end of August to be 9 months, so we're coming up really quick on our first 9 months in here.
That's crazy. I can't believe it's already been 9 months. It is not.
I know. It's flown. 45 agents later, I think we've closed 180 transactions with what we have pending. So it's been a really fun first 9 months.
That's crazy. Did you expect to have 45 agents?
I don't know what I expected. Like, I've never done this before. I've been very open and vocal with people. This is my first time ever running a lead. My background is production, right? So like my background is selling. So I don't know if I knew what to expect. I think that the transaction count is what I expected. I don't think I expected to be as many agents as we are currently. Right. Yeah.
That's crazy. So real quick, for people that don't know, what's your sales background and how long have you been doing it here in Utah?
Yeah, so I've been in real estate. This is my 11th year. I'm 31, so I've been doing it since right after I turned 21. I did 3 years in mortgage lending as a loan officer. And then I worked for the top builder in the state, Edge Homes. I sold somewhere between 575 and 600 transactions in those 6.5 years. So that's all I really know how to do, is sell real estate. And luckily those skills translate over to teaching people how to sell real estate.
Well, it seems like it has. So that's good. But what's really interesting and kind of some of the topics that I want to hop in today, the first one in particular is kind of the difference between Utah County and Salt Lake County, because our primary office here in Salt Lake County, there's a lot of similarities, but I think you would agree there's a lot of differences. So in your mind, what have you noticed? Because you've sold in both. I mean, we've both sold in both Salt Lake and Utah County, the two largest in the state of Utah.
Yeah.
But have you noticed anything different in the real estate market down there?
I think first and foremost, I think that the real estate agent approach to the business is very different in Utah and Salt Lake County. I don't know how to quantify it yet. I'm still working on exactly how I would articulate it. But I think that just the approach to the business from Salt Lake County agents is different than Utah County agents, which is why we have been welcomed so warmly down here by the real estate agent community. I think that's why they're joining as quickly as they are.
Yeah.
Utah County has a little bit more of a mom and pop feel to it still, which is really crazy with all the tech, with everything that we have coming into Utah County. It's weird that it still feels like that, but it feels a little bit more old school, I would say, than Salt Lake County does in a weird way. And I don't even know how to quantify that, but that's kind of the vibes, I would say.
Would you say old school because the people that work in that industry have been doing it for a while? Like it tends to be more seasoned agents, or old school in the sense that it's more like network friendly?
It's still like we don't have a lot of the same stuff that exists in Salt Lake County, right? Like our Women's Council of Realtors gets 8 people to it maybe every single year. Landon Powell in our office, who's been selling a bunch in the avenues recently, has been like, dude, do you know what they do as far as like these big bus tours where they go through all of the avenues listings and they all give each other feedback? Like, why aren't we doing that in Utah County?
Right.
So it's just stuff like that where it's like our purchase prices are different, but they're not that different, right? Like to me, there's no reason that Utah County shouldn't be operating at the same level as Salt Lake County. I mean, if you look at it, we have the most expensive zip code in the state here in Utah County.
What is that, Alpine?
Yeah, 84003 is the most expensive zip code, and that includes Park City, that includes Sugar House, that includes everything. But it's not being approached like that. So I don't know if it's the consumers, I don't know if it's the agents, I don't know exactly what it is, but just the entire approach to the real estate market feels a little bit like it's 5 or 10 years behind almost.
Interesting. So we get a lot of people that reach out to us in a variety of different ways, including through YouTube, that are either relocating to Utah, like a lot of people moving here, or maybe they've only lived here for a few years. They're looking at buying a house for the first time. What would you say to those people who are maybe unfamiliar with the differences between Utah and Salt Lake County from like a living here as a citizen aspect?
Yeah. Good question. I can always tell when somebody is not a local Utahn and they're moving here from somewhere that's bigger, because they will refer to the freeway as the 15. To me, it's the biggest giveaway when they're like, yeah, so the 15. And I'm like, hey, listen, I can tell you're not from here.
And they say
we just call it the freeway because that's the only one that we have. Right. So it's stuff like that I think people are having to realize is just a little bit different here, that like, but there's a lot of things that I think people absolutely love about this, right? To people like me that grew up in Highland, Eagle Mountain feels like it's clear out in BFE. To people that are just moving here, they're like, I can get an acre for under $1 million in a 5,000 square foot house, and my commute from Eagle Mountain to Lehigh is 20 minutes. With traffic, 25 to 30 minutes.
It's all perspective.
It is. And so you have people that are coming from out of state that are used to having to commute 90 minutes a day each way. So when you throw under $1 million price tag on it, we don't feel like Eagle Mountain is necessarily a suburb of Lehigh, the people that grew up here. But those that are coming from out of state are absolutely blown away at the affordability, the lifestyle that comes with living here. And included in that is a 30-minute commute, which to them feels like a godsend.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting you say that. Let's bash on Californians for a second, just because we can. And my wife's whole side of the family is from California. I live there.
Both my parents are from California. Yeah.
How dare you? Yeah. So, and by the way, that gets so much. I will get so many reactions in the comments anytime like California is brought up, and everyone in Utah is pissed off that there's so many people moving here. But let me ask you this, because for a lot of locals who like maybe got priced out all of a sudden in the last few years, they're like, oh, all these dang Californians moving here, buying homes in cash. I mean, granted, I haven't been doing it as long as you have, but I've maybe sold one or two to cash buyers from California. I feel like it's not that common. Is it more common in Utah counties or less common?
No, if you look at the numbers at the Gardner Institute, which I think is probably the foremost expert in the state of Utah, if you look at their numbers about where the growth is coming from, 64% of the growth in the state of Utah is all organic, right? So the majority of the growth that exists in Utah is from people like me that grew up. I'm the oldest of 6 kids. All 6 of those kids still live here in Utah, and they have no plans of ever moving and relocating. So I think, like I always love, it's very easy to blame the out-of-state people. If you look at it by the numbers, though, the majority of the growth right now is being driven by the fact that we are a very religious state that believes in replenishing and repopulating the earth.
Sure do.
And you have a lot of people.
How many kids do you have?
What's that?
How many kids do you have again?
I have 4, which is above the national average, right? It's double the national average.
You've already doubled you and your wife's gene pool.
That's what I mean. And I think all of my siblings will probably have between 3 and 4 kids too, right? So 2 goes to 8, goes to 16 really, really quickly. So if you look at it, yeah, it's easy to blame the people. I think what people from out of state, though, are bringing more than anything is a reality check on what pricing should actually look like in a state where income is what our state income is, right? Like if you look at it, yeah, people are getting priced out, but the fact that they were buying, my parents bought their 5,000 square foot house on an acre in Highland for $329 less than 30 years ago, right? Like if you want to talk about affordability, we were way below what the affordability level should have been.
Sure.
Now we're catching it up, and we made up that time really, really quickly. So it feels like it's pricing us out, but it's actually probably letting us see what a real traditional real estate market looks like that has the level of jobs and infrastructure and overall lifestyle that Utah is offering.
Well, there's no doubt there's been incredible growth. I mean, we've even done videos, and we'll probably post one here about how Lehigh has been the fastest growing city in Utah, and I think it was ranked like in the top 15 or 20 nationally. And some of the fastest growing suburbs are all in your neck of the woods, man. It's Saratoga Springs, Eagle Mountain, Lehigh.
Vineyard.
You're seeing a lot of new construction. Even further south, like Mapleton, Spanish Fork, we've seen all kinds of new construction communities pop up. And I think you'd probably agree the reason for that is Salt Lake County is just kind of built out. I mean, you still have some pockets. You still have, the southwest corner of Harriman, Riverton, where you can still like buy land, where they're still developing in new construction. But by and large, would you agree that most new construction opportunities are going to be in Utah County?
Yeah, we're seeing that a ton. I mean, if you look at our numbers, like we send a lot of business to Edge Homes as a team. This year, we've sent 27 deals to Edge Homes as a collective between both offices. 22 of those have been out of my office, right? So like, I do think that new construction is going to be a major player in Utah County's market going forward for the foreseeable future. And that's why all of the projections show that Utah County will pass Salt Lake County in population within the next 10 years.
Really? That's interesting. I mean, you do have more land mass.
Uh-huh.
That would take a pretty significant amount of growth to do that. But I mean,
I believe the pacing says by 2030 or 2040. I don't remember the exact
sure.
statistic off the top of my head, but it's
Yeah.
probably when you and I are both still going to be selling real estate that Utah County
We'll
will
see.
pass Salt Lake County.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I guess for people like unfamiliar with maybe Utah County, like for someone who's lived there, who's you eat, sleep, breathe real estate in Utah County, how would you kind of define, if you had to in a few words or a few phrases, either the differences between Utah and Salt Lake County, or as someone who's lived in Utah County, like what would you give us? How would you define it, good or bad?
I would say that Utah County itself is as divided and different as Salt Lake and Utah County are. And what I mean by that is if you're Vineyard North, it's an entirely different buyer, it's an entirely different client than exists in the south end of the county, right? The south end of the county still feels very much like what Utah did 20 years ago. A lot of big open spaces, a lot of
A lot
rural,
of chicken coops in the backyard.
you know what I mean? Like it feels very different. And if you look in like northern Utah County, you're going to see a lot more attached. You're going to see a lot tighter neighborhoods. You're going to see a lot more master plan communities. You're going to see a lot more areas that people are wanting to flock to.
Yeah.
Kind of like what you get in pockets of Sugar House, Daybreak, like those types of areas. You're starting to see that more in northern Utah County. Southern Utah County still feels very much like what Lehigh did 15 to 20 years ago.
Interesting. Yeah. So maybe a pretty similar growth projection as well, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think that you see that because, I mean, you sell a ton on the end of South Salt Lake County. Most people that are looking Harriman, Riverton, Bluffdale will also consider like Lehigh, North Saratoga Springs, East Lehigh as possible locations for their family.
Sure.
Like that, the county line has almost kind of gotten moved south, and North Utah County and South Salt Lake County feel very similar to me, at least right now. Pricing is, I mean, like an Edge townhome, we're going to keep going back and referencing them. Sure. An Edge townhome in Harriman versus Lehigh is like $10,000 to $20,000 difference, but it's not the same as like what a townhome in South County sells for versus North County.
Well, and I feel like there used to be like a demarcation line a little bit more between the two, and now it's like, you know, Bluffdale is like growing south and like Lehigh is growing north, and those two markets are almost like emerging, right, into becoming a little more like there's more going on between those two boundaries than there used to be, like a lot
100%.
more.
There's a lot more blurred lines than used to exist.
Yeah.
It used to be like when I first started, people that were looking in Harriman would not even consider Lehigh. Like it was completely off the record, off the table for them. It wasn't an option. And now I think it's the same buyer.
For sure. So let me transition here a little bit, still related, but you know, I'm sure you get people all the time that are looking at the market right now and they're like, hey, the feds have said that they're going to lower rates all of 2024, and they really haven't until kind of recently. You've seen rates come down a little bit. And then the next big projection is like, oh, you know, September, that's when rates are going to drop again. What are you seeing from your buyer pool, and what would you tell buyers that are maybe watching this video on what to expect when rates do drop?
Yeah, so to give some context to that, I was selling very actively. 2020 was my biggest year. I don't think that we are on pace to be like that in 2025, but I think that 2025 is going to feel very similar to 2019. I think towards the end of the year, you're going to start to feel more multiple offers. You're going to start to see less available inventory. So to me, I think you kind of have a unique 60 to 90 day window before the election where you have a lot of people that are waiting to see what happens, even though it's not going to change anything, right? Sure. Let's call it what it is. Interest rates are going to do what interest rates are going to do, regardless on who's in office.
Technically, the Federal Reserve is not supposed to make.
It's completely independent. The president is not supposed to have any power over.
Whether or not that's true, I'd open for debate.
That's the message that is being put out, though. So to me, I don't think that anything is going to change that much between November and December, regardless on who gets elected. Yeah. But I think that you have kind of a 60 to 90 day window where you can still go take advantage of massive incentives, massive seller concessions, right? Like I think that you still have a 90 day window, but I think towards the beginning of the year, especially if interest rates get into the fives, I think at that point you're going to start to see concessions start to dry up pretty quickly, and then you're going to start to see purchase prices follow thereafter, and then you're going to see multiple offers follow directly following that. Yeah,
and actually you told me this I think a while back, and I was like, yeah, that's a great point. Is kind of the leading indicator of all that happening are builders, particularly builders like Edge, not to keep referencing them, but the bigger builders, right, that have a lot of buy-in in the market, they will be the leading indicator of what's to follow, of all those things you just said. Because as soon as those new construction buyer incentives go away, as soon as the market change, that's what will happen first, right? Those incentives go away. Hey, we're no longer offering 3%, maybe it goes down to 2 or 1%. Who knows? Maybe builders start changing what they're willing to offer as compensation to buyers agents, right? I think that would be your leading indicator of the market sort of shifting again, as you said, with a rate cut. But what do you think? Because I have this conversation every day. Do prices go up or down when that happens?
I think they go up. Yeah, I think that they go up. We're already starting to see builders raise prices. I was a little bit wrong on that prediction. I'll be the first to admit it. I did not understand how much buyers are shopping concessions right now. People are shopping concessions right now more than they are purchase prices. So once that starts to shift with interest, and I think that's what shifts the most, right? If you buy your interest rate down from a 4.5 to a 3.5, yes, it makes a difference, but not in the same way that buying from a 7 to a 5 does, right? So I underestimated how much buyers are shopping for concessions right now, or shopping based on concessions for the most part. Like we had a listing that was sitting, Adrian had a listing that was sitting for 80 days, went to do a $10,000 price reduction. Instead of a price reduction, he offered 10K in concessions. Within 4 days, he had multiple offers, right? Wow. So people are shopping for concessions. So you're going to see just those prices start to go up, because in essence, Edge can either get rid of their concession right now,
sure,
or they can increase their purchase price 1.5%, and you in theory just lost half of your concession.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Here's what's really interesting, and I looked at this as you were talking. So our inventory is about to hit 11,000. Do you remember the last time we hit 11,000 active listings?
I don't know. Probably 2016, if I had to guess. 2017, maybe. We might have hit it in 2023 for a minute.
Right. We might have a little bit, but 11,000 listings. Where would you say? Where would you advise your buyer? Hey, once it hits this many listings, we are now in a buyer's market, or are we already there?
They like to say somewhere between 3 and 4 months worth of inventory. Anything above 4 months is, and this is Michael's theory, not mine. So if it sucks, then go after Michael Perry at Michael Perry 123.
Yeah, we'll make sure
we'll make sure we tag him. So if you disagree with us, you can go comment on him sitting on his Cybertruck.
And also make fun of his Cybertruck for sure.
I think if we get up above like 12.5 to 13,000, that's when you're officially going to be in what they call a buyer's market. That might be kind of the gray area in between the two.
Yeah.
I think once you get to about 14, 15,000, that's when it would be like a full-fledged buyer's market.
Dude, here's what's nuts. When I first started, it was like we had 2,000 homes on the market. Rates were still low. Everyone was panicking to buy a house. People were waiving, due diligence, waiving
inspections, waiving appraisals,
like paying way over purchase price. And so it's crazy that just in this short amount of time, we might be in this like really weird other market. Now, of course, that affects buyers and sellers. How does that affect agents? How do you think that new market, where there's a different dynamic to doing transactions and negotiating, if you're a buyer or seller out there and you're trying to figure out like, hey, who do I want to represent me? How do you think that affects agents if we shift to a market where now there's way more inventory?
They're going to have to, and I think that this is why I have not allowed part-time agents in my office. Like this question right here is what keeps me up at night, right? The reality of it is that's going to switch within a 30 to a 60-day window. It's not going to be gradual, right? It's not going to be over 6 to 10 months. It's going to be 30 to 60 days.
All of a sudden there's
and so if you're not actively transacting in the market, you're going to be 90 days behind, and what you could be getting for your client is going to be entirely different, right? So if it goes up, the concession should be higher. The offer that you're submitting should be borderline offensive if we get to 13 or 14,000 listings. If you're not transacting with an agent that has been transacting in the market and was transacting 60 days ago, knows the difference between 11,000 and 13,000 active listings, you're missing the mark. Vice versa, if it goes down, your agent, I think this is where our counties go back to being a little bit different. In Utah County right now, our existing inventory, if you took all the new construction off, it drops by 44% right now.
That's nuts. So you have 44% of the active listings in Utah County are new builds.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And so if all of a sudden those dry up, which I think they're going to, because builders are not bringing on lots at the same speed that they were 2018, 2019, 2020.
Well, and it's because going back to the inventory, we had an inventory crisis. Now, you can still argue it's still kind of a seller's market technically, but with that many active listings and that much competition, are builders going to be incentivized?
I think that they will be, but what people forget though, Scott, is it takes 2 to 3 years to get a subdivision approved.
Very
Right.
true.
It's not, once again, it's not just a faucet that they can turn on and say, hey, we have lots again. Right. They have to go out and procure it. Their due diligence, their financing is entirely different than it used to be. Right. My dad was in here speaking to us today. It used to be that you could debt service with 10%, right? Meaning that if you brought in $1, they would bring in the other $9 for a $10 piece of ground. Now it's closer to you have to bring in $6 as the builder versus the $4 that the bank is willing to lend you.
Wow.
Right? Because they're unsure on what the market's going to look like. So to me, in Utah County, if you're not an agent that is very, very familiar with what new construction offerings are out there, who actually has inventory, who's not going to have inventory 6 months from now, you're going to miss the mark. I think Salt Lake County, you guys do a lot more off market than we do. I think that's going to be how agents are going to have to go out and generate deals once that inventory starts to go down. You're going to have to go and generate it through off markets. In Utah County, you're going to have to know what builders have inventory available for you.
Yeah, true. I wanted to make a snide comment and also say that you also have to make sure that it's not Indian burial ground.
That too. Yes, that too.
Diligence if you're a buyer or a builder. Yeah, very true. So roughly what 25% of our team's listings sell off market, which is like kind of crazy. That's like absurdly high for anyone who's not familiar with that. So would you say that in terms of like value proposition, and you know, whether it's an agent on our team or on any team, how would you say that the importance of being able to, you know, not to make this all about realtors, but the importance of being able to articulate how valuable it is to have access to off market or, you know, these pocket listings if you're a consumer, right? Let's look at it from a consumer standpoint.
Yeah. If it's from a consumer standpoint, I think that you need to look at the value proposition that agents are offering today has to be different than what it was 10 years ago. Yeah. 10 years ago, I think the biggest value prop that most agents had was that they could gatekeep all of the MLS, right? If you want to see what is available for sale in Utah, you have two options. Number one, there's some magazines every now and then that you can maybe grab. Or number two, it was your agent. That value add no longer exists, right? The amount of homes that you are currently finding for buyers is a lot less than what it was for an agent 10 years ago. Why? Because of the access to platforms like Zillow, right? So now your access to information from buyers, I would say statistically speaking, the majority of the time, the buyer's probably already seen a house online before you even send it to them. So that can't be your value add anymore. Your value add has to be, I will go and find the deal for you. I will go and find you something that you're not going to be able to see because you're not in the market. You don't know who's maybe thinking about selling, that if I brought them an offer, they would say yes. So if you're a consumer, you need to ask yourself, especially as inventory starts to dwindle over the next 12 months, is this agent somebody that I can give my order to in essence and have them go and find me a couple of options when no options exist?
No, great insight. I think that's all very true. By the way, let me know when you have to hop off.
You're good. If
you had to point to opportunities in the market, whether you're a buyer or a seller, what are some of those unique opportunities that's either specific to the Salt Lake City market, or, you know, the Utah market in general, or maybe on a broader scale? I'll let you kind of take this question where it makes sense. Where do you see those opportunities? Like, what do you think it's going to be in the next year or two?
I think first you have to define what an opportunity is. If your goal is long-term appreciation.
Yeah, so let's say opportunity in the sense of owning real estate, whether it's just a primary residence. I'm not necessarily talking investors, although, you know, there's a point to be made there. But what would you say just in general opportunities?
I think if you're looking for a larger piece of land in Utah County, Eagle Mountain, South Saratoga Springs, and South Utah County, Mapleton, Pace, and Salem area. If you are looking to house hack something, meaning like a townhome or something like that you want to move into, put a small amount down and keep it as a rental property for the foreseeable future.
Yep.
A townhome in Lehigh is absolutely still, to me, ridiculously affordable when you step out of our bubble and you compare it to what other markets look like, right? If you're in an Austin, if you're in a Denver, if you're in a San Francisco, if you're in a Los Angeles, the fact that like you can be 5 minutes to Adobe for under $500,000 right now doesn't exist in other markets that transact like ours. So to me, your long-term hold, to me, growing up here, I'm like, who in the hell is paying $500,000 to be on the west side of I-15 for a townhome?
Sure.
The people that are moving out of state, they're like, dude, I could ride my bike to Adobe. I could ride my bike to Oracle. I can ride my bike to Vivint. Like, that doesn't exist in other markets that are similar to ours from a jobs perspective. That doesn't exist. Like you're not living 5 minutes away from the office, 10 with traffic, right?
Yeah.
To us, that feels very, very far. To everybody else that's moving in here, it's, dude, my payment is $3,000 and I live this close to the office. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So to me, I think that the opportunity exists if you can step out of what our bubble is and see our market for what it actually is going to become over the next 3 to 5 years, which is even more unaffordable.
Who's to say it doesn't turn into that in the next?
I think it does. I think it does, Scott. Like if you look at everywhere else that has everything going from a jobs perspective and an economics perspective, every other market that looks and feels like ours is not priced like ours.
Let me take this a slightly different direction then. We're biased, right? We love Utah. We love living here. And there's a lot of good things about living here. But for anyone who may be watching who is either considering moving to Utah, or maybe they just moved here and they're not quite sure if they want to stay, maybe they want to rent for a little bit and test the waters. What are things that people should be aware of that are maybe either cons or maybe just really uniqueness or aspects or attributes of living in the Salt Lake? I'm going to say Salt Lake City, but really the Salt Lake City Valley, right, to include Utah County. What are things people should be aware of if they're considering relocating here?
Our infrastructure sucks right now. Like as far as like the fact that we don't have multiple freeways, like we're starting to, right? Mountain View, Bangor, some of these are starting to turn into that.
Yeah.
But the fact that we have one main north-south corridor,
right,
is psychotic.
And really nothing
right?
east-west.
Correct.
215 kind of, but even that doesn't go all the way across the valley.
It doesn't. Like you have the 80 that really doesn't take you to anywhere in Utah. Like I think Utah has done an amazing job at drawing companies to come and set up headquarters here. We did a shit job at spreading them out, right? So we talked about the inventory shortage that exists because of the natural growth that we have here, right? Currently, as a state of Utah, we're somewhere between 30 and 40,000 homes short for the amount of people that we have living in the state of Utah. If you're in California, where Sacramento to Los Angeles is what, an 8 to 10 hour drive, that's fine because it's spread out all over the state and you can kind of have your pick. The majority of that house shortage that exists in the state of Utah is within a 20-mile radius of where you and I are sitting right now, right? It's south of Salt Lake and it's north of Vineyard. Like we have done a terrible job of spreading these out into further north and further south. So there is some nuance that comes with that, right? Like our infrastructure doesn't supply very adequately the amount of people and the amount of jobs that we have brought to those areas.
And then just for, because I've lived in a bunch of different states, either from military service or, grew up in Oregon, went to school in California. But you've also visited and lived other places too. Is there anything from a real estate perspective, good or bad, about either how the neighborhoods are laid out, how the cities are laid out, anything that you would say people should kind of know that's a uniqueness aspect of the real estate here in Salt Lake City? Like, does that question make sense? Of like, how would you compare it to maybe other markets from a housing standpoint of how things are laid out?
I would just go back to what I said earlier, that it all feels very, very consolidated, right? In a lot of places that I've lived, you have a big pocket and then you have a gap and then you have another big pocket and then you have a gap and then you have another big pocket. Here we don't. Like if you're just driving down I-15, I still to this day struggle knowing when I went from Sandy to Midvale to Sugar House, right? Like it's not clearly defined by land, right? You can't tell the difference from when you're in Lehigh to when you're in North Saratoga Springs. You can't tell the difference between when you're from Highland to Alpine, right? So like it is very unique in that way where it kind of just feels like one mass instead of like separate areas.
Yeah.
I do have to run, by the way. My appointment just showed up.
Oh, did you? Okay, cool. Yeah. I was going to say the way that I would answer that question, and then I'll wrap up here, is it's like we're so landlocked that most major metropolitan areas, it's like, Dallas, Charlotte, like you have the downtown area and then you have all the suburbs and like it expands outwards. But we're not we can't really do that. We can't really draw the radius bigger because we're so landlocked between.
We have mountains, we have lakes
and mountains and all this stuff. So the geography aspect of it plays a huge role. But I appreciate you coming on here, dude. Again, for anyone who has questions or, whether you're going to move to Utah in 5 days or 5 months, reach out to us. We'd love to help answer your questions. I'll put our contact information below and a few links for people thinking about relocating here. So appreciate it, Boo. Thank you.
Of course, dude. Thanks for the time.
All right. We'll talk to you later.